Call on me. I'm just gonna immediately get us copyright strike.
With you singing, probably not.
No. Hey,
Well, I didn't mean that.
it was a
don't know.
perfect rendition. I don't know what
It
you're
was
talking about.
It was really good. I didn't mean it that
Thank
way,
you.
but I.
They're gonna know. YouTube's gonna strike it because it sounds so spot on.
Exactly, and we just said what it was too. So, or maybe
No, we didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't say anything. We didn't say that it was "Call on Me" by Eric Prides.
No, we did not say that.
No, nobody said that. I have
Nobody
no
said
idea
that.
what you're talking about.
Especially not you.
I didn't. I don't even talk. I don't know how to
If,
speak.
if anybody, it was me.
It has to be you. It's only you.
It's only me.
It was International Women's Day yesterday, so everything is on women from this point forward.
Including the woman whose book we just read or listened to.
Correct.
Becoming
Michelle
by Michelle
Obama.
Obama.
Yes. I'm going to let you do this. I'm not going to here, you go ahead and take it. We're going to do this unabridged version and I'm going to let you take the intro cuz I don't want to just go back and forth.
Why am I taking it? I think it was your idea to do the book to begin with.
Was it my idea to do Michelle's book? Oh. Interesting. Wow, look at me being.
I know. Well, I'm grateful that you picked this book, and I'm excited to start digging in. I know we're just doing a sort of preface version here, so we can have a moment to collect our thoughts and insights from the book. The audiobook was 19 hours, and we both did the audiobook. I might also get the Kindle. I wish they gave you transcript for the audiobook. That would be helpful because I really want to see some of the kind of the quotes that I took out and everything. We'll see if I do that. But curious about, well, you didn't remember that you suggested this book in the beginning, but now that I mentioned that, what do you think could have been the reason that you did that?
I don't know because I think what did we do? 2 guys before it, and I felt the need to. I felt like it was important to get a wider representation of the books we read and the people's lives that we intake. So, quite the opposite of we had a white man and then a half white man, Trevor Noah, half black, half white.
The second one,
And
so
then
we did Matthew, we did Mindy, we did Anthony Bourdain,
Jeanette McCurdy,
Jeanette McCurdy, and then we did Craig Ferguson,
Trevor Noah. And now Michelle Obama. So I felt like we had to get some sort of, I don't know. I always I was reading her husband's book for a little while, and then her book kept getting recommended to me. So I thought it was maybe in the moment, I thought it was a good way to take it into a different perspective. Also, in hindsight, now looking back, it's very interesting. Like if you want to just get into it and to some degree, or like kind of preface the next part of our conversation, but it's very interesting to see, like, to really put into perspective what it's like to live and be in the White House, like as the president, as the first lady. Like there's a lot that goes into that, and personifying that and making it very personal was very interesting. It was like there's a lot of respect that comes with it. So like I'm very glad that I did end up reading this book or listening to her read this book to me. Thank you, Michelle. But it was very interesting to see like that this is just a normal human being that it gets put into this position of like a nonstop 24/7 go for 8 years straight. That must
She even says that towards the end. She says, "I'm just an ordinary person who was put into this extraordinary life or a situation."
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't even into it. Like every single, so a little a little gripe with like her throughout this book, at least for the first half or so, is she was so pessimistic the whole way through. Always so, well, maybe not pessimistic, but more like she let her realism get the best of her in a lot of ways, and just like being like, no, you'll never win. No, it won't happen. No, it's not going to work. And I'm just like, Michelle, just believe. Like, I don't know. So for her to, but when she stood up at the end, like towards the end of it, or like towards the middle of it, when he did end up winning the presidency, and she's like, all right, well, I have this feeling of like, now I'm gonna serve, and like this is the thing, and I'm gonna go all in. It was very impressive to see her kind of shift from that like nothing is gonna work out, or like the odds aren't in our favor, to now making it more like we're gonna make the odds in our favor, which was neat.
Yeah, well, she's a pragmatist and a realist, right? And so there
Mm,
is there is so much that I took in from listening to this book, which is why I feel the necessity to regroup my thoughts and insights.
mhm,
Um, but I wanted to say that I'm glad that this book came in our pipeline when it did. Like, I think if it were the first book that we had listened to or read, oddly, I wouldn't have been ready for it. I know that's like an odd
sure.
thing to say because we're just listening or reading,
Mhm,
but I feel like the topics that she covers from her own personal growth, like from her own personal childhood, how she was raised, where she's from, to relationship, to laying that context with her and Barack, and why she ultimately did say yes to this political life when she was never really into politics, to the time at the White House, to now what she's looking on to next potentially. Um, there is a lot in there. There's a lot to unpack. There are a lot of sort of themes that arise from her entire story. And what I really liked about it, which it's interesting, at first when I started, I think it grew on me as I listened to it more and more. So that was the case for me. Where in the beginning my thoughts were kind of like, how the heck does she remember in such vivid detail these memories from childhood?
yeah,
Like
dude. Do you remember the time like later in the book? I'll let you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but like I'll let you go back. But do you remember that time when she talks about what she bought at the grocery store? She literally listed off like we bought. I don't even remember what she said, but like how did like I was we've talked about that before, but I was blown away by that. But like yeah.
Yeah. So how much of it is, her memory versus maybe a writer helping her to
Yeah.
square away the edges and the corners, to maybe she had journals at certain point. She just mentioned that at one point in the book. But then later on I realized that she is in fact a very detail oriented person. Like that's obvious from
Also
her.
true.
Right, from her, characteristics, how she from her behaviors, like her everything throughout the book we learn, and she says she's very detail oriented. So in that way, I think that she's just very different from somebody like me, potentially you as well, although I'm not sure that that's for you to say, but I'm not as detail oriented. So for me, I get like I remember the general sense of things. I maybe remember how I
Mm,
felt about things, and I kind of like feel them and then I'll let them go. And so months later, years later, unless I really take the time, which she probably did, I'm sure. I have no idea how long it took her to write this book, but I'm sure
yeah.
it was a venture. I'm
Mhm.
sure it was not easy to remember all of this stuff, to remember all of the details, and then
It
to
was long
also
enough of a book. I swear to God.
right, and then to kind of like the thoroughness of it. So that's something I really appreciate. I really appreciate how thorough she was in explaining the topics that she covered, and not just topics, but how she felt about things and then how she made decisions throughout her life. Like I would
Mhm.
find myself asking, myself the question about like, well, why did she do this? And in the next couple of minutes, she would explain exactly why she did that.
Mhm.
And I learned a lot from her explanations of what was happening, what she was thinking, what she was going through, and why she made certain decisions. So, anyway, what I was saying was, I'm glad where this book fell into our pipeline because we've recorded several episodes now. And I feel like I learned something different with each book we read or listen to. And I truly think that before Matthew McConaughey, like, without the insights that I got from that book, I would have gotten less from listening to this book.
Sure.
Because he talks about, um, obviously green lights, but,
Mhm.
like, we learn from him the confidence that he had, the sort of saying yes to opportunities, his upbringing, how he thoughtfully navigated different times of his life. Um, and it's mostly focused on his sense of purpose, I would say, and his career for the most part. I actually didn't get to the part in the book where he talks about his relationship. But when
Mhm.
you are, in Michelle's case, when you are the first lady, and you have decided to say yes to that path, and you are in a situation for several years where you have to sacrifice some of your own interests, your own goals, your own ambitions in order to serve that role and that position. I think setting up the context of not only her as a child, her education, her hard work as a younger person, but then also how deeply she fell in love with Barack and their relationship. I feel like that context is really important to understanding why she said yes to this, understanding what it took for her and what it meant for her to sacrifice the many parts of herself that she needed and her family that she needed to give up in order to live and serve under the public eye. So there's a
I
lot
find
to
it.
take in.
Yeah, but I think that one thing that was cool about that though is like I wouldn't necessarily say that she sacrificed as much as she did shift in a way. I mean, she definitely sacrificed. There was a lot of things that came with being the first, like being the president and the president's wife, in the United States, of like literally not being able to go anywhere by yourself, and everything's being monitored, and you can't even do anything for yourself to some extent. But I think a lot of her focuses in life were always kind of in that space of like trying to help certain people or trying to be there to better her community in some sort, and now she was offered the ability to do it on a grander scale um at a cost in some parts of her life. But it was her more of her ability to take the opportunity she was given and take the life that she was given and
Yeah.
shift it in a way that she could also continue to push forth her goals and her mentalities as the first lady. It's first lady, right?
Yeah. I think that
Okay.
speaks to a lot to her ability to do exactly just that, like, take what's in front of her and then figure out how to dig into that
Mm-hmm.
in a way that feels authentic to her and also
Mm-hmm.
creates impact. But
Mm-hmm.
she does talk about while Barack was running for president, we know how ambitious of a person she is and always has been. I mean, she
Mm-hmm.
went from Southside Chicago basically almost entirely on her own doing. I think her mom and her dad, particularly her mom, was key in, like, even how they raised them to be self-sufficient. And when she got
Mm-hmm.
pulled out of that 2nd grade, class because her mom went to the school and was
Mm-hmm.
digging into what happened. But Michelle was very, um like an achiever from the beginning, and driven and, like, goal oriented, result oriented, competitive.
Mm-hmm.
um I saw a lot of similarities actually in some of between her and some of the themes that have come up in the past with regards to feeling like you need to prove yourself and that being a motivating fact or a driver in your
Mm-hmm.
journey. But throughout her, for before she met Barack, she career was like the most important thing to her. I think she wasn't even dating because she was like, I'm putting my, I want to excel at work. And
Mhm.
so I remember she talks about this point of time when Barack is running for president, or he has
Mhm.
decided he is running. And then we see slowly over time she has to give up more and more of her career at
Independence.
at her medical center. So not only her independence, but also she mentions it, and she specifically says that at work, she was still doing a good job, of course, and she said that she other people probably didn't even realize it, but she started stepping back from taking opportunities that she would normally take because she knew that there was no way she would be able to execute them, and then also be a mom, and then also support Barack and everything that comes with that in running for president. I think without the political stuff creeping into her life, she would have said yes to those moments where she felt like there were these opportunities for advancement in her career, as she saw her career before all of the, more political stuff started creeping into her life. But
Mhm.
I think, like what you said, she is the type of person, which is, I feel, very empowering, who she takes what's in front of her and figures out how to convert it into an
Mhm.
authentic path forward that creates impact for others according to
And
principles
for
and
herself.
beliefs that she resonates with, and for herself. Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate her ability and throughout the book never to really harp on the what ifs as much as many people tend to. And I think that's very important. Like you said, like what we've been saying is like her ability to kind of shift the focus and really morph it in a way that you know um that is the best for the community around her and for herself, without regard to what could have been or what should have been or what she would have rathered happen. Like she understands that that's a part of life or like a part of her mentality that can creep in and be like, I wish this would have been a better case. But whenever she's faced with something, um, it's never a shutdown and being like, I don't want to do this. This is so stupid. I'm done. Like
Yeah.
whatever. She always just kept pushing forward and understood that
Yes.
life moves on. And if anything, it really kind of shows how incredible these two were these 8 years. You
Yeah.
know, because to be able to really take on that position and really push as much as they did, and from this book, seeing how much they do on a daily basis is
Mhm.
ridiculous. It's insane, and anybody that wants to criticize that or whatnot needs to listen to this book or read this book and really try to understand what it's like to be put in this position, because that is something that takes an incredible amount of like you said, sacrifice of your own life for the betterment of the people around you, your community, your country. And it's very selfless, but and incredibly impressive. That's the more and more that she got into the conversation.
That's how I felt throughout the entire thing. I was just like, "Wow, this is very impressive."
Ridiculous. It really
Very,
is. Like,
very impressive.
and it was, I mean, granted, it probably made it a lot like I'm not trying to like to downplay it or anything at all, but when you have a team of people that will drop anything to do what you kind of say, you can move and do anything. So it also goes to show that they wanted to
But
do
she
that,
kind of
you
had
know?
to fight for that. If you remember
E-
during his presidential campaign and she was left to her own devices,
For
her,
the
like,
beginning until she messed up. Yeah.
yeah.
Or messed
Um,
up, but
yeah,
even
right,
still.
right, right, right,
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, that is
she had
interesting.
to ask for the resources and for the team, and then she learned. So that was another thing kinda going off of what you're saying. I saw throughout the book this, and she talks about it at the end too when she talks about what, and maybe did you get to the part where she defines becoming to her?
I don't believe so. Is that like at the very, very end
Yeah,
or
it's like the last 5
okay.
minutes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then no. No, I haven't yet.
Right.
I'm like right
So
there.
okay. So I'm not giving anything away, but she talks about how becoming is more of like it not a single end you're going towards, but more of like a continuous, like a momentum, continuous evolution, moving
Mhm.
forward and pushing on to the next step, to the next step. And in both her, it was really interesting not only learning about her, but then also seeing Barack through her eyes. I found
Mhm.
that very interesting. But in both of them, this the to use your terminology team, like both of them are like a team and it's evident,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the yin and the yang. But despite the hiccups that happen, despite missteps, they keep pushing forward and they
Mhm.
learn from every misstep and then apply their learnings the next time around, and they don't use it as like he failed the first campaign that he had for, what was it, like senator, right? I think, and
Mhm.
maybe it was like
Something like that.
state senator or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And and this is our whole podcast is about success. And we've seen now in several scenarios, like Craig Ferguson is coming to mind. It's really funny, like putting these, starting to see the insights between
How does
the
Craig Ferguson come to mind? Please explain that one.
because do you remember when he first started stand up and one of his friends suggested he should do stand up, and the first time he did, like, I think the first performance or whatever, if you, I don't know what you call it, like a, I'm
Mhm.
saying performance,
Open
but
mic or whatever.
open mic or whatever he did, there was like almost nobody there, and he got like, very few claps or whatever. But then he went again and again, and it was still the same. I think it just very gradually his audience started growing bigger, but he kept going. And so I keep thinking, like, what about all those people? And I think that's part of the purpose of our podcast and uncovering these insights is not only to share these insights with us, but then also with other people who everybody has the potential to follow through with their dreams and to achieve success. And so for Craig Ferguson, I think, like, what if he stopped after the first
Mhm.
open mic? What if he
Mhm.
stopped after the third one? Like, what if he was like, "Oh, nobody showed up. I suck. Like, I'm not doing this again. This was a bad move," right? But he didn't. He kept going. He kept pushing forward. And so with this book, like, I could see that trait of keep pushing forward. Let's say with Barack Obama's failed, initial campaign that he made for state senator. Another person would have been like, okay, this is, I failed, like, this isn't gonna work. I guess I'm not cut out for this type of thing. I made the wrong decision, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't have stayed in Hawaii. I should have,
Mhm.
whatever. But he keeps moving. He takes he kind of absorbs what happened with that campaign, doesn't let it affect his values or his principles, and then moves on to the next step. And he's not harping over it the next time he runs around. It seems like we don't really know what's going on inside, his mind. But from what I gathered, he seems like a very calm and collected person, and arguably, like, if anybody's gonna be president, it should be somebody like him who just naturally has the characteristics you need to thrive in a situation exactly like that, where you absorb
Mhm.
facts, you absorb knowledge very quickly, you hold on to all of that, and then the more intense something gets, the more calm you get, the more you're able to step up to the plate with composure, and you like having a lot of those big challenges and those plates spinning in your life.
Mhm.
We saw Michelle, like, it was interesting seeing her talking about that. But yeah.
Mhm. I'd like to meet him in real life. I wonder what his character traits are actually like, because like you only get so much of like what he's like in his big like speeches and whatnot. But I'd like to know his mannerisms because I bet because I don't think people understand how smart this man is. I
Oh
really
my
don't
god.
think people understand how smart he is. Like and how like just even throughout the whole thing of how many books he reads and how much like he was like top of his class in Harvard and shit. Like, homie, like if you're gonna call this man an idiot, it's like you better have something going for you behind the scenes like that. That's nuts. Um, so I'd love to meet him because I bet you, like, part of me thinks that he's probably a little weird, like weird in the way that's just like awkward because he's just very smart. He's just one of those like, and I felt like there has to be something. Like I'm not trying to like make fun of him or anything like that. It's more of just like I'd love to just like study, like get to know that. Like
We'll
what
we'll add
is his
we'll add
actual
his
personality
book
trait?
we'll add his book to the mix. I remember
I've
when Michelle talked about taking him to the happy hour and how he just, like, was not. I think that's what you part of what you're looking for because he's clearly very intellectual, very, like, into abstract topics and, like,
mhm,
deep, impactful topics, right? Like, not
mhm,
of course, he, like, watches sports too,
yeah,
um but yeah, but not into your everyday kind of, like, these, like, lawyerly groups talking about, their penthouse or their apartment or their cars and that
mhm,
sort of stuff. It seemed like that didn't really appeal too much to either Barack or Michelle. Michelle kind of had a
mm,
little bit of that lifestyle for a bit, but that
mhm,
wasn't, the thing that, like, resonated with her most deeply, and for her too, I mean, like, all of her achievements, you know, going to Princeton, and I have some stuff I think next time we record that I would like to chat about that whole journey too, but, like, going to Princeton and then Harvard Law School, like, how difficult is that? Like, how driven do you have to be and mature do you have to be in order to keep having these academic successes and going for these goals? And what I find really interesting about her is that she did really well in almost every situation she put herself in, even when her heart wasn't in it. That's very difficult for me. Like, if I'm in her shoes and we could talk about this next time, but I was actually pre-law for a while. You might not know
hmm.
that about me. Yeah, I did debate in high school, mock trial in high school, mock trial in college. Um,
Love that.
yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. But she was working this, like, job at the law firm, and she said that it wasn't really, like, satisfying her deep down. But she was still really good at it. She was still working really hard. I'm sure she was still outperforming a bunch of people around her and all people who are the likes of Harvard graduates, many coming from very privileged backgrounds. And so it's insane just the amount of drive and intelligence and maturity that she carried with her throughout life and continues to. This
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Why wouldn't you? And I mean, like, just like with that whole mentality of like, even when her heart wasn't into it, she still worked really hard. What's the harm in working hard, when even if you don't like something? Like, in the end, it might, like, you're still just gonna continue to move up in a career that you may not necessarily like, but it's not taking, as long as it's not taking any time away from your ability to explore other ideas and new lifestyles, when you clock in, doing your best there is just going to make you feel good about yourself at the end of the day, even if you don't like it, more so than if you got there and you just fucking played with your thumbs the whole day. I don't know. That's a very interesting mindset, and but for both of them to be able to kind of just hunker down and keep pushing and keep going and have that. I like listening to this book and understanding where she came from. I kind of like, I guess I can piece together where she gets this mentality from and all the little messages in life. But I don't know. It just seems like something that's just deeply ingrained in like her willpower to continue to push, and I wonder where that comes from. Like, where do you find that willpower and that continuous momentum that like to do what they did? Like, where does that come from? Where in their life were they not told no? Where in their life were they told no? Where in their life were, like, you know what I mean? Where was that? What was it in that they built for themselves that really establishes that mindset? And that's very because I fuck, dude. If I don't like something, I'm not gonna do it, which is the dumbest thing.
Yeah,
It's
I
so
agree with you.
stupid.
Right.
It's because like listen,
I
like
agree with you.
do as I say, not as I do. But
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to do as I say.
Yeah.
Ah,
And then draw those lines and those boundaries and know, like, for this amount of time, I'm going to everything I say yes to, I'm going to do a great job at.
mhm. Yeah,
And I will
seriously.
right. And then you're careful about what you say yes to and what you don't say yes to, and you learn as you go about that too, navigating that. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
maybe
agree
that
with
is the
you.
instinct. Maybe that is
Yeah.
the thing, is just not saying yes to everything. Because I mean, I don't know about yourself, but I have a very hard time at saying no to things. So when
Yeah.
I do say yes to a lot of things, I tend to put too much on my plate, so I kinda have to half-ass some of it sometimes
Mhm.
just to get it out of off
Hey,
of my
hey,
to-do list.
don't half-ass it.
Alright, Matthew McConaughey's dad, calm down. I know, but, like, that might be the reason for it. Because if I have too many things that I'm trying to finish in a week, then obviously something's gonna suffer with that. Something
However, remember our friend Barack Obama was indicated in this book to constantly be saying yes to too many things
yeah, he's just
and
fucking
not
a freak of
following through
nature.
with, like, his book manuscript initially. And he was just
Oh,
kind of
well,
like,
yeah.
"Well, I'll just get another publisher."
Yeah, it's true. It was true, wasn't it? The confidence. God
Yes.
damn. That's true.
A
This man.
cool, collected confidence.
I guess that's what
It's
it
not
takes,
like there weren't failures. It's not like there weren't failures. There were. It's not like there weren't times where people did not follow through. There were. But then
It's
it's
just how they
yeah,
react.
yeah, or respond. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. Respond. Yeah, sorry.
Mhm.
Don't react. Respond.
Mhm.
Priya 2023.
Yeah. Oh, good memory.
Thank you. Horrible memory.
Well, clearly not as good as Michelle Obama's.
Oh, absolutely not. This woman could tell you what she bought at the grocery store 3 years ago on a specific date. I don't get it. Her brain must be huge. She has so many compartments. Or very filed. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the problem.
Yes.
Her brain is very well filed, so her ability to just like it's like a computer. She can just be like, this file, this thing. My shit is just like just shoving papers in a backpack and just going, it's in there somewhere.
Yeah, but they're all good. So I was thinking about that and like kind of this idea of a role because roles came up in this book too, many times. And of course, I have some quotes I could pull up or whatever. But um, like when she describes Barack and his personality, and I can't help but
Hmm.
think like if anybody's gonna be president, it's gonna be Barack Obama. I mean, he's just built for that, just naturally, the characteristics and everything. And for her
Hmm.
too, right? She like I think sometimes a part of me can't help but when I'm listening to these be like, oh wow, she's so organized and so detail oriented, right? And a part of me thinks like, oh, but I like what about me? Like I'm not, I compare myself, right? Like I'm not as organized. Um,
Hmm.
my mind kind of works differently, but I think that's okay too. Like, and I think that's where just like them, it's kind of like a a tree doesn't try to change the color of its leaves. I feel
Hmm.
like we as humans are constantly trying to like finding fault with ourselves and trying to fix them or feel like these traits that other people have, are better or admirable. But, just as organized and kind of like file minded Michelle Obama might be, that I was thinking about that. Like, what if I were more like that? But what if my natural tendency is more creative and kind of like entrepreneurial? And that's where my role fits in. That's where my skill set
Yep.
fits in.
Yep.
And so I
I was
think a lot of it
about to
is
say.
accepting and embracing our natural tendencies and really
Hmm.
like you know, pursuing our purpose and roles that align with our purpose that tap into those. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to point that out because I think it's easy to see great people and be like, "Oh, wow, their show," but 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 then we're all also really good at the things that
Mhm.
we're really good at, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Reading this book actually has kind of inspired me to maybe take more of a serious approach when it comes to anything that I do. Meaning that, like, I think you and I talked about this a while ago as well. The last time we talked, of like, eh, instead of like, because my whole journey at this point is creating content and making YouTube and making in like social media content, and that's where I'd like to stay and that's where I'd like to flourish. But with that being said, there's this mentality right now of creating content for content's sake. But while reading this book and seeing the intentions behind everything that they did, at least for
Yeah.
the 8 years that they were there, even for the years leading up to that, and even
Mhm.
like just like their connections to political leaders or like social change leaders or anything like that, there was this feeling of like that's more there's more of an importance to strive for that than there is to just create entertainment for entertainment's sake. um
Yes.
and I'd rather I'm slowly feeling as if I'd rather make a dent in anything and present things to the world that have some sort of a purpose rather than just there to live for 24 hours and then die. Um,
It never seemed like I wanna be a politician, I wanna be president. It was just like, how can I have the biggest impact on these issues that I feel like are pressing for the world?
yeah, exactly. Figuring out the things that are really important to you, and not, I don't know, because there's also the mentality and there's also the argument of like make your money first and then use that to create your, or like find your audience
Which
first and
is
then
what
use
her
that
mom
audience.
told her. Her mom
Yeah.
told her, when she was, thinking about switching careers, her mom said,
Hmm.
"Well, if you want" she was like, something like, "If you want my advice or whatever," she's like, "I"
Make
and
money
they she
first.
rarely yeah, and worry about happiness later.
Hmm.
Of course,
Yeah.
Barack told her different advice or
Was
guided
that
or
what he
like
said? Did he guide her differently?
yeah. I think she
Yeah.
said that he was the only person who was kind of like, "Don't worry about it, we'll make it through. Do what feels right," sort of deal. I don't remember the exact words, but it was more along those lines.
Yeah.
It's like, "You
Yeah,
got
which is
this. Don't
nice.
worry too much."
Yeah. You'll figure it out either way. It's
Yeah,
like as long as you feel fulfilled in what you're doing, then it'll work itself out, or you'll make it
yeah.
work. Which is interesting. Which is
Purpose.
a nice
Purpose above
mentality.
all else.
Purpose.
Yeah,
Purpose. Yes.
right.
Yeah. And it's a
Which
little more
also looking
justified.
yeah, also looking at them, I feel like if we look at Michelle's strengths, I feel like for Barack, her personality is exactly what he kind of has had needed in life because
Hmm.
he's very much optimistic and like living in the world that could be, right? Not the world
Hmm.
as it is. But she
Hmm.
almost serves as that anchoring point of like,
Hmm.
this is how things are now, which goes back to your initial point about like her maybe not having faith or optimism about his running.
Hmm.
I see that, but I also see just like the how her she naturally is in terms of being a realist and a pragmatic and how that probably helped their family,
Yeah,
especially
point out
their
all the things.
family. Right.
Mm.
And how she was able to leverage that strength of hers to maintain stability for them as a family, as a couple, for their children, and then even for the country while in office and
Hmm.
beyond. So I think you kind of like it's like the perfect complement, right? Like for somebody who's very idealistic, you kind of need somebody who's pragmatic to have that sounding board and have that help in that like what needs to happen right now.
Yeah, and vice versa also, because she needed
Yep.
him to kind of push her away
Yeah.
from her realistic mentalities and pragmatic mentalities, just to allow her to find her own purpose and such, instead of just sticking with something because it seems like the most viable option at that time.
Exactly, which brings me to, like, a point that I think that none of the other books have really talked about yet, and it's the role of your life partner in your journey to
Hmm.
success and it's as a part of
Mm,
your success, which is why I'm glad that this wasn't the first book we covered because I feel like we needed to explore some of the other pieces of the puzzle individually. And this one
hmm.
kind of connects a lot of them. But
Sure.
um, I know initially we were chatting and, before I had gotten to that part of the book where she meets Barack, you mentioned how she, like, kinda, like, talks about him a lot once he gets into her life.
Hmm.
But then I think we see, like, we we see the role that they played in each other's success, and we see how they complemented each other, and we see how they kind of like pushed each other to greater lengths than they would be able to otherwise achieve individually.
Hmm.
And so I think that's the topic that I would like to, explore a little bit more. It's like the role we talk about success in terms of success as a career, but then what role does your partner, if having a partner or like if you do have one, like what partner you have, like the different characteristics, how they balance out, what role does that play in one's success as well? Um, Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, for within the last couple relationships I've had, I'm very, very cognizant and very aware of like their impact on my ability to better myself and continue to
Mm,
thrive in my own things. So it's definitely something to always consider, and it's something that will ultimately. It is something that like has not come up with the other books, and it's like you said, a very interesting stretch into seeing that it's not all just about the individual, it's also about the people that you surround yourself with, and like you said,
yeah.
especially the person that is your life partner or soulmate or whatever you want to call it. A person that's going to be there, are they going to push you to continue and like and challenge you and make you a better person, or are they going to enable you into your faults and your struggles and not necessarily help you out of those things, which in the end, is that what you want, or is betterment something you're striving for? And
Right.
um
Are
whether or
they
not you
gonna
can, because I
support
mean,
you and be by your side even though it
yeah.
might not be what they intended for their own life individually?
Correct. Yeah, and I wonder if there's a difference between somebody who, like, is it bad to have somebody that doesn't necessarily challenge you, but supports you and allows you to explore life by yourself? Is that a bad thing to have? Is that something that's like, I guess it comes down to preference of what how individualistic you are, or how much of an independent person you are. But I wonder if there's a benefit to more of a benefit from one to the other, of somebody that challenges you versus somebody that's just there to support you. Um, yeah.
Yeah. In this case, I think it's obvious that it was sort of like a balance of both.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I've myself been in a situation before where, I felt very in a previous relationship where I felt very supported but not challenged, and
Hmm.
I couldn't do that. I, like, needed the self-improvement is so important to me, and, like, I
Hmm.
felt like I needed somebody to also call me out on things and challenge things and bring different viewpoints rather than just being 100% supportive and, like, saying
Hmm.
yes to whatever I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, 19 hours.
Anyway.
We made it
Yeah.
through.
Yes, we did.
After
Almost.
getting through it, I understand why is 19 hours minus 5 minutes for you. I understand
Yes.
why it was 19 hours long, and,
It's a long journey.
It's a long journey and a lot very thorough recounting of the long journey for the most part.
Mhm. Very much so.